Welcome everybody to our IIP talk with Adnan Ćerimagić on the European Union and Western Balkans relationship. It is in the context of the high-level conference on the Western Balkans, which is going to take place on the 23rd of June. Adnan Ćerimagić is a senior analyst at the Berlin-based think tank European Stability Initiative. He has been commenting in various media on dealing with the Western Balkans and the European Union. He has been writing articles. He is a very common guest in state media and also media from the region. And I very much look forward that you found your time to talk to me today about the upcoming summit. So thank you so much, Adi.
Thank you for having me.
I also forgot to say that Adnan Ćerimagić is also part of the advisory board of the International Institute for Peace. And so I'm happy that we always find a possibility to cooperate in many senses. And I look forward to our next 30-40 minutes discussion about what we can expect from this summit. So Adi, I already mentioned that on the 23rd of June, there is this high-level conference on the Western Balkans. It is under the auspices of the French Presidency, but it is something different than the European Union Western Balkans Summit, which will take place, as far as I know, in fall under the Czech presidency of the European Council. My question now from me to you would be, what do you think can we expect from this meeting now next week?
Well, the meeting comes at a time when there is a lot of pressure inside the EU to discuss about the future relationship of the European Union and the countries surrounding it who want to join the EU. So we know that the accession process that the EU has had since it has been founded with countries that wanted to join it has de facto stopped working in the past 5 to 10 years. Countries in the Western Balkans that have been recognized as potential candidates, that have been in the process, applying, becoming candidates, opening accession talks, we can see that that in these countries, EU accession process is neither motivating reforms. We see that in Montenegro and in Serbia. It's neither rewarding those that manage to do reforms, as we can see in North Macedonia and Albania, where after many years of reforms, EU is still not capable to respond to their progress. And we see that two countries, at least Kosovo and Bosnia and Herzegovina, have been almost forgotten by the accession process. So I think that the Ukraine war and the applications of the three Eastern European countries, Ukraine, Moldova and Georgia, have created a pressure inside the EU to finally start making decisions on the Western Balkans. So what I expect from this conference is to offer a forum where discussions on what next could be made, and where then afterwards, after this discussion, we could finally start to see European Union making decisions. Just one point, EU hasn't made a significant decision on the Western Balkans, on EU enlargement, since 2017, when it has closed the last chapter of negotiations with Montenegro. We haven't seen any country starting accession talk, any country becoming a candidate, any country closing chapters or becoming a member for many years now. So it's really time for EU to start making decisions.
Thank you. You mentioned this kind of enlargement fatigue, which was quite present in the last decade, I would say, and everyone thought that when it comes to the Western Balkans, they might be the last ones finally at one point to join the European Union. Now you also mentioned Ukraine, Moldova and Georgia. And the application of Ukraine in the midst of the war, which Russia is launching on them, was quite surprising in many ways, I would say, for the Western community, because we all could agree, I would say, that these countries have not been at all on the list for a future European Union accession in the, let's say, 20 years to come. So now with this new, I mean, they do not have yet candidate status, but they're really very much relying on this European Union accession as a perspective, also as a way to get out of this horrible war there. Do you think that Ukraine will also be a topic on this summit, or is it only about the Western Balkans?
I think that on around those days, we will see the discussions inside the Council among the member states on the opinions that the Commission is expected to publish on the three Eastern countries. So I think that potential decisions or decisions that the Council might make on these three countries will definitely have an impact on the discussion on the Western Balkans. I can explain that inside the EU you have three different groups of countries. One group of countries are countries of Eastern Europe, which are extremely supportive towards a Ukrainian bid for EU membership. Among them, just to name few, is Poland, it's the Czech Republic, Slovak Republic, the Baltic states. Then you have a second group of countries which are sympathetic towards Ukrainian bid, but are mostly focused on the Western Balkans and have interest to see enlargement to the Western Balkans. From Austria to Greece, I would say, are those countries. And then you have a third group of countries which are skeptical towards future enlargement towards any of the named countries. And, you know, if we speak about the Netherlands, Denmark, if we speak about France also including, then those are those countries. So now at the Council, you will basically have a match between these three group of countries, and they will need to come up or they will want, it would be good if they would come up with a certain kind of compromise that would put all these three different viewpoints and different positions in one. So I think that discussing Western Balkans and the future of EU enlargement to Western Balkans is nowadays impossible to do without discussing the three countries. I mean, they applied for EU membership. Their application has been acknowledged by 27 EU member states and has been forwarded to the Commission and asked for their opinion. As you rightly say, they're still not official candidates, but neither are Kosovo and Bosnia and Herzegovina. But somehow our impression is that their bid has been serious so far. So I think that there will be definitely discussions that that combine these two groups of countries, I would say like that.
Since you mentioned France or, for example, the Netherlands, I mean, those countries a little bit more skeptical towards full accession, full enlargement. I wanted to ask you about the new suggestion also of President Emmanuel Macron. He was already we remember I think it was in 2018 when he was blocking the opening of the accession talks for Albania and North Macedonia. And now he then afterwards initiated this whole idea, let's discuss about the future of Europe. And then very recently in May, he also came up with another new idea, which is the political community of the European Union. Many now fear that this could be something like a substitute for the enlargement process. How do you view this Macron idea of a political community within the European Union in the context of the enlargement process?
I think that the source of this proposal is this position, which is not just the position of Paris, but also a position here in Berlin, and which has been underreported or not seen as serious as the one in Paris. And that is the position that in general, both Paris and Berlin are in favor of having this EU perspective for 6 Western Balkan countries. They agree that these 6 countries should one day become members of the EU. However, both in Paris and here in Berlin, but also elsewhere throughout the EU, there is this need or this understanding that can only happen once the EU has done its internal reforms, be it when it comes to the decision making, when it comes to the institutional setup, how the Commission looks, how big it is, etc. And I think that all these proposals come as a result of understanding that at the moment it's difficult to say that 9 countries that have applied for EU membership plus which we tend to forget could become members of the EU in the way that 10 Central and Eastern European countries became in 2004. That now we can say by 2027 all these countries can join if they reform, and if they do, it seems really impossible that the EU could come with that kind of a decision. So all these proposals, but not just the political community or geopolitical community from President Michel, but also some non-papers, including the one from Austria, I think the source of all these proposals is in this understanding that the internal reforms will take times, and that the Western Balkans, but also Ukraine and other countries, simply cannot take credible the promise that, you do reforms, we do the process with you, and then let's see, if we reform, you will become full members. So there's this attempt to offer countries something that is something that they will like, and something that will motivate them to reform, that is not full membership in the EU. I think that the proposal from President Macron was clear that it's not meant as an alternative to EU membership for those countries that have the perspective, and that is not meant as a substitute for that. I think that the proposal from President Michel, which builds on this proposal from President Macron, is then more tailored to this particular situation where you have countries that want to join, that are in the process, but that due to internal EU issues cannot join. So needs to be offered something tangible in the meantime.
Since you already mentioned before that especially Bosnia-Herzegovina and Kosovo are not yet within this process, does it change anything for them, this idea of the political community? Do they have the fear that they are dropping out of this Western Balkans six, because we already talked about bringing them all in together at one point? This is one of the discussions, or if they should become members at one point individually. So how would you assess this discrepancy between those already at one point within the process and those who are still outside?
Well, to be honest, at the moment when the accession process is broken, I cannot see any difference between privileges that Montenegro or Serbia have compared to Bosnia-Herzegovina and Kosovo. If you look at the speed in which the readiness for EU membership is changing, according to the European Commission report, annual reports, nothing dramatic is happening in Montenegro and Serbia. Actually, there is no progress, or in the since 2019, for example, there's no progress in any of the four countries that are not Kosovo and Bosnia and Herzegovina. So with the accession process broken, except for the fact that some are considered front runners in the process, there is actually no privilege for these countries. And furthermore, inside the EU, there's this opinion that, if you have an offer for Serbia, and if you have a credible process for Serbia, then it's good for both Kosovo and Bosnia and Herzegovina, because Belgrade then has a focus on EU integration and can, battle with the dark ideas and dark visions that are still there in Belgrade. I'll just remind you, during the time when Serbia was supposed to open accession talks, Serbia was in Brussels, signed an agreement that led to integration of police, judiciary, and customs in Kosovo, Serbian municipalities into Kosovo institutions, showing that when EU has offer, not just that it's not being consumed by dark visions and dark ideas, quite contrary, it's making concrete positive steps. But that kind of dynamic we haven't seen really for years, if not for a decade now. So I think for Kosovo and Bosnia-Herzegovina, it would be important to have a revival of the accession process, because pushing countries forward towards the EU would mean also opening a space for Bosnia-Herzegovina and Kosovo. But I think in the best case scenario, the proposals like the one from the Austrian non-paper or some other proposals from President Michel, etc., should in best case scenario be offered to all six, plus the three countries of the Eastern Europe, but to all six. It shouldn't be reserved for the countries that are now in the accession process. If you would have an offer to both Bosnia and Herzegovina and Kosovo, for example, to join for freedoms and the single market of the EU, in a way that some other offers were made to all at the same time, like energy community or transport community back in the days, that would definitely then, change or contribute to changing the dynamic for these two countries. And in Kosovo, definitely contribute to this sense of isolation, with the visa not being granted, with the problems of non-recognition by some EU member states. You really have a feeling of isolation in Kosovo, and I think that also for a wider context needs to be addressed.
Thank you so much. Adi already mentioned the issue of the visa liberalization, which is still lacking for Kosovars when, for example, if you compare it to 44 million people in Ukraine, they already have it in several years. So this has to be a topic which should be addressed. You also mentioned the non-recognizers. There are still 5 European Union member states who are not recognizing Kosovo. And there is, I would say, like a third very important topic, and that is the one between Bulgaria and North Macedonia. You mentioned before that the European Union needs also to look a little bit about how it is going to reward if a country is doing reforms. North Macedonia has been doing those reforms. It has been doing many reforms. It even changed the name of the country. Then it made also a friendship agreement with Bulgaria. But then suddenly something else came up. Maybe you can explain very, very shortly, why is it that Bulgaria is still blocking? Like, what is behind it? And do you think that the European Union, because we all know that many European Union countries were also quite surprised when Bulgaria came up with another no sorry for different reasons, like how can the European Union maybe pressure Bulgaria? Will the summit be a possibility and an option for the European Union to press on Bulgaria to drop those seen by many people quite ridiculous, I would say, opposition points when it comes to the accession of North Macedonia?
Well, if I can just briefly touch upon the visa liberalization and the example of Ukraine that you've showed, I think it's immensely important for us to understand what happened with the Ukrainian citizens and the EU's approach to them and what it means for the Western Balkans, because within just a couple of weeks of the start of the war, we have seen EU27 deciding to extend one of the 4 freedoms that exist in the EU to 42 or 44 million Ukrainians, the freedom of movement, in a sense of you can come, reside, and you can work freely in any of the 27 EU member states. I think it has been a wonderful decision by the EU. It was a right decision to do, but it points also to the fact that a lot of skeptics towards enlargement always point to the fact that, you know, Western Balkans have around 18, 19 million population. If we get them into the EU, if we offer them these freedoms, all of them will come and, you know, distort job markets, etc. What we see in Ukraine is that despite the war, it's not all the 42 or 44 million that are coming. Actually, it's a quite a small proportion of the people. It also shows that if you would give to Kosovo, which is barely 2 million population, a visa-free travel, you know, it makes sense. And the Ukrainian example shows that nothing terrible will happen to the EU, and it's not even, you know, freedom to reside and to work. It's simply freedom to travel for tourist purposes. I think what happened between Bulgaria and North Macedonia is really a disaster for the accession process that already wasn't working, that already wasn't delivering. The fact that Bulgarian government decided to take on an issue of history, the issue of identity, into the accession process and try to impose it on 26 other member states to then also push it as a joint EU interest against a country that has really shown a most positive transformation that we have seen inside the Western Balkans for decades now. The reasons for it in Bulgaria have cultural, have also are partly linked to the education inside the country, because the support for the moves that the government has been doing for blocking, for insisting on issues of history, culture, language, and similar issues has been very strong and very big. And I think it's a warning for all of us, how if you do not address the education, if you do not address some of the issues, it can haunt you back politically and create a burden for the government. I mean, it's a big burden. If you think about, Bulgaria sitting in the council, every time when North Macedonia is being discussed, you have 26 states which are saying the opposite and which are trying to pressure the government to do different things. I'm very skeptical that something might happen anytime soon because of the internal Bulgarian reasons. We have a weak government now there. We have government that has been delivering due to the Ukraine crisis quite a lot when it comes to energy issues, when it comes to the sanctions, when it comes to the delivery of weapons to Ukraine. And that, additional decisions of strategic and internally very much debated issue of North Macedonia, there is probably a calculation inside the government that might create troubles. So I would be very happy if that happens. I think that North Macedonia has deserved to open accession talks, but I'm somewhat skeptical at the moment.
When the war started in Ukraine, I caught the attention that the European Union more or less realized also the strategic importance of the Western Balkans when it comes to European Union security. Would you agree on that point? And would you say that this is also part of the reason why there is a lot more talk now about the Western Balkans than it was in previous years, also from countries which used to be a little bit more skeptical, like France, for example. Now Olaf Scholz was in the region, Annalena Baerbock is there, has been there already and found very, very clear words towards a commitment towards the full integration of the Western Balkans into the European Union at one point. So would you say that this idea of Russian influence also within the region is also part of the reason why the European Union now is a little bit refocusing? I'm not saying that accession is now upcoming, but would you say that this is valid?
I think that for anyone who was not following Western Balkans and its EU accession process, hearing High Representative Borrell or General Secretary of NATO Stoltenberg talking just 2 or 3 days after the invasion on Ukraine started about potential areas where Russia might expand its actions, and then naming Moldova on one hand, and then naming Bosnia and Herzegovina and Western Balkans on the other hand, if might have been caught by surprise. Because if you look at the map, you will see that the region itself has 3 NATO members, and 2 that are not, out of 3 that are not NATO members, 2 have NATO troops on the ground and EU troops in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And then they're all surrounded by the EU. They are in the process of the accession. So one, might be, caught by surprise. How come that these countries are fragile to the extent that both NATO Secretary General and EU High Representative are speaking about them? But for those of us who know the process and how it has been going, we know that it has created a lot of frustrations and a lot of weaknesses in the region, from North Macedonia and Albania, which we discussed, to Bosnia Herzegovina, Serbia, and Kosovo on the other hand. So I think that in that sense, we've realized that also politicians at high level have understood and have been understanding for years now that the empty rhetorics of EU perspective was not good enough. But now, at the time when there's an actual war in Europe, where Russia is behaving as it is behaving, he suddenly said, well, it's not enough for us just to think, that things will work out somehow in Western Balkans, but we really should do something. From that point of view, I fully agree with you. Both what Chancellor Scholz, what President Macron was saying about Western Balkans being in the heart of Europe, being surrounded by Europe, about the need to do something there is extremely to the point. I mean, Chancellor Scholz in Pristina said something along the lines as the accession process needs to become realistic. We need to offer something that people and the governments think that is achievable. At the moment, we are not offering that. So I think that the analysis is perfect, but when it comes to what are the solutions to it, I still don't see them. I still don't see them from the German government. I don't see them from Brussels. And even the proposal of a geopolitical union community from President Michel is an interesting concept. But when you look at the details of what it might be, it's still not good enough in a sense to be an offer that the Western Balkans could take. Also, I think that one of the proposals should be offering Montenegro to become a member of the EU as soon as possible, and that could happen by 2025. You know, if you think about Montenegro, it has opened all chapters. It could finish its accession process by 2025, because we have seen countries finishing it within 3 to 4 years. It's a NATO member. It's a very reliable NATO partner. It hasn't used vetoes. It has been aligned with the EU foreign policy since 2017, at least, when the chapter on foreign policy has been closed, and it's a reasonably small country. So having a 28 EU member states as we had with the UK inside the EU would not create institutional or any other problem. So on one hand, EU is saying, Montenegro, you can join by 2025 if you do the reforms, and then offering something credible to other countries in the region would be a path to revive the process. But at the moment, as I said, nothing serious is being offered as a solution, I would say, for this problem.
I mean, the enlargement process was not only slow because the European Union didn't want the integration. There are also many problems within the region. I mean, we know the war has been raging in the 90s, the different wars which have been raging. There is still not really a reconciliation with the past didn't happen. There is still democratic problems. When you talk about Serbia, the media freedom is one of the biggest problems. And then if you look at Bosnia-Herzegovina, Dodik has also been doing quite some damage, I would say, for the integrity of the country as a whole, for this multi-ethnic idea of a multi-ethnic Bosnia-Herzegovina. There is also a general rise of authoritarianism we can observe within the region. What do you think could the European Union do in order to support that they are not really going along this way, but they are going more into a democratic, pro-European path, which brings them closer to the European Union?
I think it's extremely important to, as you point out, to divide the two things. On one hand, it is that we have an issue with the EU not having an offer for the region. We have an issue that the EU doesn't have an impact, or the impact of the EU in the region is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. I spoke about integration of judiciary, police, and customs in Kosovo in 2010s. And today, Special Representative Lajčák is struggling to even have a permanent solution for how car plates should look like when cars travel between two countries, showing you really how low the impact of the EU in the region has reached. So on one hand, we have that, but on the other hand, we have politicians in the region and the citizens and the public, which have, two different paths to take. And I always use North Macedonia as an example of a country with the government and with the citizens that have taken a path of being European, in a sense of doing what the EU would have wanted it to do, and seeing the benefits of it. Yes, North Macedonia has not opened accession talks, and it's a disaster and it's bad for the EU. But at the same time, citizens of North Macedonia are doing much better because the government did what it did. It solved the issue with Greece. Now the relationship between Greece and North Macedonia are better. Economic relations are improving. Just traveling as a citizen of North Macedonia to a seaside in Greece is easier and nicer than it was before. And let me not speak about, the fact that the Albanian minority in North Macedonia is doing much better, that is more represented. Half of the government today consists of Albanian minority, and that, dismantling of the captured state, the fact that the Prime Minister is not calling the judge and ordering how they need to rule on different things is good for citizens of North Macedonia, despite EU's lack of capability to respond to it. And then on the other hand, we have countries like Serbia, where both the media freedom, both the democracy is suffering, and the citizens' rights are suffering according to all the rules. So yeah, it's better for North Macedonia, but than it is in Serbia. But it does, come down to whether, on the other hand, whether EU has impact. I think what EU needs to do is to come up with an offer to those countries in the Balkans, like North Macedonia, that reform themselves, that do the things that they're expected to do to see some benefits and achieve some benefits. It can be full EU membership, and I'm really all for it. If EU is capable, due to the Ukraine crisis, due to some things, to say all these countries can join the EU by the end of the decade if we reform the EU inside, and we're going to do the reforms inside, that would be the best case scenario for us. But what if EU doesn't reform inside? What if the readiness for enlargement doesn't happen? Then we need something for these countries to be offered in order for EU to have impact and for these countries to progress. And I think offering for freedoms, de facto single market membership to these countries would be something tangible and something that both the citizens and the politicians could work for and could that feel for. Just as an example, in 2017, we had a new government coming into power in North Macedonia. If this offer was made back then, to this government, the question is, back in the days, you had Latvia, Lithuania within, 34 months or 32 months finishing accession process to the EU. De facto, North Macedonia could have, with a lot of effort, with a lot of struggle, could have by now been part of the single market, could have implemented all the reforms, rule of law reforms that it's already implementing. And today, citizens of Serbia will be looking at North Macedonia and seeing them enjoying the freedom of movement, freedom of, goods and all the other things, and seeing, all the companies that are leaving China, that are leaving Russia, that are struggling because of the issues with Ukraine, coming from all Western Balkans, probably to North Macedonia because of the fact that is, becoming part of the single market. And that would then definitely have a positive impact on Serbia, but also on the other countries in the Western Balkans, where, President Vučić wouldn't be saying, look at the North Macedonia, they changed name, but they didn't get anything, but would be saying, look at North Macedonia, they solved their big issue with Greece, but they have, become part of the single market and are enjoying for freedoms.
Thank you, Adi. This is also about the motivation, the lack of motivation, which you already mentioned in your first answer. But now Croatia is already a part of the European Union. And do you see this effect, this spillover effect of Croatia towards the region? Because I would probably doubt it a little bit.
The reason is also historical relationship between Croatia and countries in the region. If we think about the biggest impact that Croatia might have, it's probably Bosnia and Herzegovina and Serbia. But relationship both with Bosnia and Herzegovina and Serbia are burdened by history that Croatia did not manage to deal with in a sense of, the situation in Bosnia and Herzegovina, relationship to Croat population in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And I would have to say, though, here at this point, I would have to say that Croatia never blocked any decision on Serbia since it has become a member of the EU. Any opening of the chapter was never blocked by Croatia. Croatia had its own demands, bilateral demands towards Serbia, but that never led to blocking. So to some extent in relation to Serbia, actually, Croatia hasn't been. But as an example to both Serbia and Croatia, that it's good to be part of the EU, that it's good to be part of the NATO, except the economic argument, which clearly shows that the gap between Croatia and the center of the EU is narrowing with a bigger speed than the narrowing of the gap between Serbia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, or any Western Balkans with the EU. The financial support that the Croatia gets, the fact that it's now joining Euro, that it's probably joining the Schengen, is all signals the benefits of being part of the EU. But I think because of the historical reasons, because of the political bickering inside Croatia, which are presented in our media as they're all the same as our politicians, the image of Croatia in that sense is not positive, or as positive as it could be and as it should be. And I think it's really a shame that Croatia is not understanding its role, not just in the region, but also inside the EU as a country that should actually serve as an example, both for the EU and the Western Balkans, and should be then pushing the accession process for these countries.
Thank you. I think it's very important, as you mentioned, also the different relationships between the different countries, and why you always need to analyze a little bit differently. There is nothing like a blueprint in this sense. I have two more questions. One would be, because I think this is also very important for not only for the European Union head of states, but also for the citizens to understand living within the European Union. What would we gain if the Western Balkans would at one point become members of the European Union?
Well, let me start from the economic point of view. If you think about all the investments that the EU has been transferring to Romania, Bulgaria, and to Greece, to some extent, the potential of these investments in infrastructure, in economy, in any other aspect are simply not fulfilled to its fullest without integrating Western Balkans inside the EU. Bulgaria, Romania, and Greece can fulfill their economic potentials to the fullest only at the point when all these countries are part of the EU, and when you have basically, everything coming together at its place. From the foreign policy point of view, integrating countries of the Western Balkans would be a great success for EU foreign policy. EU would be able to show that despite everything that has happened to it in the past 10 to 15 years, it has been capable of making strategic decisions and stabilizing the region and bringing it inside the EU, and it would fulfill one of its oldest promises that have not yet been fulfilled, and that is the Thessaloniki promise of EU enlargement to the Western Balkans. Relationships between these countries and the EU, with Germany, with Austria, at the family level, at the economic level, at the person-to-person level, are so deep, are so developed in the meantime, that integrating these countries would be in a certain way what we have seen in 2004, and that is bringing back the countries to Europe. These countries coming back to Europe and becoming members of European family. And from the point of view of these EU member states, it would be a great success. And it would be, as a last point, it would be EU's token to expanding the zone of peace and prosperity to the Western Balkans. I think that citizens of the EU until 24th of February were completely unaware of a continent at war that is the one that is outside of the EU. Since 1990s alone, people inside the EU have thought, the wars have ended, the EU is in peace and prosperity, and this is the reality of the European continent. But if you look at outside of the EU, you will see many wars, from the Balkans to Chechnya to Azerbaijan, Armenia, Nagorno-Karabakh, to Ukraine, to many wars that have been engulfing the European continent. And you will see that the only way for the countries to stop having wars is to expand the EU. So for citizens of the EU, it would mean, and the politicians in the EU, it would mean to expand the zone of peace and prosperity.
Thank you, Adnan. A very important point also to talk a little bit about why the European Union actually was founded, because it was also founded as a peace project, saying no more war within the European Union. And now what we see is that it is still possible to have a war on European soil, but most probably not within the European Union. I do have my last question. And that is because we talked a little bit about how to motivate reforms. Reforms should also be rewarded, but also that the process of enlargement is not a slow one. I mean, we also need to be realistic and pragmatic. And this is also very important, of course, when it comes to the Ukraine case, because a fast accession track is not available at this time. My question would be now, what would be your wish, if you look now at this high-level meeting, what could be the best possible outcome, also realistically?
Well, I think, and I really think it's realistic to have a three set of decisions. The first one would be to say, we offer Montenegro to become the 28th member of the EU within the time frame that is possible for them to finish the reforms. I personally think it's 2025. and that it's likely, but if it's not, it's also 2027, but I think 2025. I think it would be of immense signal to other 6 Western Balkans that the EU is ready to disrupt this system of we have 6 Western Balkan countries, they're not in the EU, and let's see how we deal with them not being in the EU. And I think that Montenegro is the furthest in the process, and it's the smallest in a sense it's when it comes to how easy it is to digest. The second decision, and I also think it's extremely possible if the EU would want to start to make decisions, is to say, and all the 5 other countries can join the EU by the end of this decade if they do reforms, of course, and if they transform it, if the Commission says they're ready, if the EU does internal reform. So if we get the smaller Commission, if we agree on qualified majority voting, if we do the institutional changes that we need, all 5 others will become members as well. But at the same time, say we are aware that this kind of offer is not credible enough for the Western Balkans. There's a lot of ifs. It can be that one country says, yes, we did institutional changes of the Commission, but we didn't change, all the unanimity issues or anything. It can be anything. We didn't say, it can be stopped by anyone for anything. That we say as a third thing, no matter what happens with the changes of how the institutions work, our internal reforms, no matter what happens, who's the president of France in 2027, all of those countries that do reforms, that change, that improve their rule of law, that align with the EU foreign policy, will be able to enjoy the 4 freedoms. And this year or early next year, we will sign a treaty about it, saying that we commit ourselves that as soon as the Commission says that you're ready, you will get to enjoy in 4 freedoms. And I think the fact that we all have the free trade agreements, that we have, that the EU has extended freedom of movement of people to 40 million Ukrainians, shows that EU can digest this, that there is not a big issue. So freedom of movement of goods, freedom of movements of capital, it's all possible for the small 5 Western Balkan countries. So that would be the 3 things that I would want. So Montenegro as a full member as soon as it does reforms. Second, promise of membership for all 5 other countries by the end of decades if reforms inside the EU are done. And third, no matter if these reforms are done or not, you will definitely be offered a chance to enjoy in 4 freedoms of the EU.
Thank you so much, Adi. I think it was very interesting. We could talk a lot more about these different topics, but I really appreciate that you found time. And I hope for a very positive and also realistic outcome, as you just described it, for the 23rd of June. Thank you so much. Follow us on Facebook and on Twitter. The IIP is also on Facebook and on Twitter. And we will be doing in the next years and month many different talks on actual political developments. So again, thank you, Adnan. It was very nice talking to you. Have a good day. Goodbye.
Thank you.